Family, hear this loud and clear. When God steps into your morning, he steps into your battles, your burdens, your doubts, and your destiny. Today is not just another sunrise. This is heaven announcing that you are still chosen, still covered, still equipped, and still moving forward. Nothing the enemy tried, nothing life threw at you, and nothing you feared last night has the authority to override what God has ordained for your day. When you stand in faith, you are standing in the supernatural. When you trust God, you unlock what no human hand can deliver. And when you commit your morning to him, he orders every step that follows. The message this morning: open your heart and declare, God, I trust you even when I can't trace you. Because faith is not about seeing the whole picture. It's about believing that the one who holds the picture is already working behind the scenes. When life feels uncertain, faith becomes your anchor. When you feel overwhelmed, faith becomes your strength. When you feel surrounded, faith becomes your victory. God has a way of taking what looks scattered and aligning it. He has a way of taking what seems delayed and accelerating it. He has a way of taking what seems broken and restoring it better than before. Some battles were never yours to fight. They were God's from the beginning. Some doors were never meant to be pushed. They were meant to be opened by his hand. Some blessings were never meant to be earned. They were meant to be received by faith. This morning, release every worry that tried to keep you up last night. Release every lie that whispered you weren't enough. Release every weight that tried to steal your joy. Because when you make room for faith, God fills that space with favor, guidance, and supernatural peace. You may not know how the day will unfold, but the God who woke you up already knows how he will sustain you through it. You may not see the outcome, but the God who called you already sees the victory. You may not feel strong right now, but the God who promises strength will not let you fall. Stand firm, stay anchored, walk boldly, not because everything is perfect, but because you know the one who is. Prayer. Lord, this morning I place every step, every thought, every assignment, and every challenge before you. Guide my mind, strengthen my spirit, protect my path. Let your presence fill this day with purpose, clarity, and peace. Lead me where I need to go. Remove what distracts me. Release what strengthens me, and remind me that with you, nothing is impossible. Amen. Faith isn't just a quiet belief tucked away in your heart. Faith is a force, a spiritual earthquake, a shift in the atmosphere that changes what your eyes can't yet see. When you wake up and choose faith, you are declaring to every mountain, every attack, every doubt, and every fear, you will not decide my day, God will. That single decision becomes the spark that sets everything around you in motion. Because faith doesn't just move your mindset, faith moves heaven. Faith invites divine power into your ordinary moments. Faith pulls tomorrow's breakthrough into today's expectation. Faith makes the impossible bow to the authority of the one who is with you. Here is the hook. The moment you choose faith, something in the unseen world has to shift. Nothing remains still when faith is active. The spiritual realm recognizes faith. The enemy recognizes faith. And heaven responds to faith. Even when you feel weak, even when you feel surrounded, even when you don't understand what's happening, faith starts rearranging the atmosphere long before your situation begins to change. You see, fear paralyzes, but faith mobilizes. Fear shrinks you, but faith strengthens you. Fear tells you to stay in the familiar, but faith pushes you into the supernatural. When you choose faith, you stop living by what you can calculate and start living by what God can orchestrate. The atmosphere around you shifts because faith isn't passive, it's aggressive. It takes ground, it breaks patterns, it opens doors that human effort couldn't budge. Another hook. Faith changes your posture before it changes your problem. When faith rises in your spirit, you start talking differently. You start thinking differently. You stop accepting defeat as your final destination. The atmosphere inside you grows stronger than the atmosphere around you. Suddenly, what once intimidated you begins to look small under the light of God's power. Faith lifts your eyes higher, pulling you out of anxiety and placing you into alignment with God's promises. And here's what makes faith so powerful. It invites God's presence into every corner of your life. Where God's presence is, peace comes, strength comes, wisdom comes, strategy comes, breakthrough comes. Your environment may not change instantly, but the spiritual climate does. Instead of walking through the day in your own strength, you begin to walk with divine backing. That backing shifts outcomes, alters conversations, redirects decisions, and opens pathways you didn't even know existed. Here's another hook. Faith is the atmosphere where miracles breathe. When you operate in faith, God can multiply what seems too small. He can revive what looks dead. He can rebuild what has been broken for too long. Faith prepares the soil of your spirit for seeds of blessing that God has already planted. It softens the hard places in your heart, clears the fog from your mind, and ignites a conviction that says, I may not see it yet, but I know it's coming. Faith also disrupts the enemy's plans. The enemy thrives in fear, doubt, confusion, and discouragement. But the moment faith enters the room, his influence weakens. Faith shuts down the lies that whisper you're not enough. Faith cancels the anxiety that tries to rob your peace. Faith silences the thoughts that tell you nothing will change. Faith builds a shield around your mind and a fire inside your spirit. One more hook. Faith prepares you for the blessing before the blessing arrives. It gets you ready. It positions you. It aligns your expectations with God's intention. When your faith rises, heaven responds. Doors begin to shift, hearts begin to soften, and situations begin to rearrange. Not because you forced anything, but because you believed. Delay is one of the hardest places to stand, yet it is one of the strongest places God builds you. When everything in you wants to move, fix, control, or rush the process, God whispers, be still. I'm working while you're waiting. That's the mystery of faith. Just because you can't see movement doesn't mean heaven isn't moving. Just because you don't see progress doesn't mean progress isn't happening. And just because the door hasn't opened yet doesn't mean God hasn't already prepared what's on the other side. Here's the hook. The silence of God is not the absence of God. It's the stage where he does his deepest work. Waiting seasons are not wasted seasons. They are preparation zones. God uses them to stretch your faith, sharpen your discernment, and strengthen your character so that when the blessing arrives, you're ready to carry it. What looks like a pause to you is often divine protection. What feels like a delay is often God aligning the right people, the right timing, and the right opportunity. So everything fits exactly as it should. And here's another hook. God is not only arranging the blessing for you, he's arranging you for the blessing. There are some things your heart is still growing into, some things your spirit is still learning, some things your character is still being refined for. The wait isn't punishment, it's preparation. The wait isn't rejection, it's redirection. The wait isn't God ignoring you, it's God investing in you. The wait is where God ensures you won't sabotage what he's building for you. Waiting builds a strength. Can't get emotion. It teaches you to trust God without needing constant signs. It teaches you to believe even when you can't predict the outcome. It teaches you to stand your ground when everything around you says move. This is where endurance grows. This is where spiritual maturity develops. This is where faith becomes unshakable because you've learned to trust God beyond what your eyes can see. And here's a powerful hook. When God works behind the scenes, he works in dimensions you can't imagine. He goes ahead of you and clears obstacles you didn't even know were there. He softens hearts of people who will play a role in your story. He closes harmful paths you thought were good and opens miraculous paths you never expected. He works in conversations you're not part of, rooms you haven't entered, decisions you haven't yet heard about. He moves pieces you don't even know exist, arranging everything with precision so that when the moment comes, it feels like everything falls into place at once. Waiting requires patience, but patience is not passive. Patience is active trust. Patience is confidence that God is too intentional to be early and too perfect to be late. Patience is saying, God, I don't know when, but I trust your timing more than my understanding. And when you learn to trust his timing, you break free from the anxiety that tries to rush your spirit. Another hook, waiting, is where faith grows roots. Roots that keep you grounded when storms come. Roots that keep you steady when emotions rise. Roots that keep you anchored when doubt whispers. Roots that make you unmovable, unshaken, and unbreakable. Because once you've experienced God coming through after a long wait, you stop panicking during delays. You start expecting God to show up the same way he did before. In the waiting, God is also revealing things. Sometimes he shows you what needs to leave your life before the blessing arrives. Sometimes he shows you what new habits, new mindsets, or new disciplines you need to develop. Sometimes he reveals who is truly for you and who can't walk into the next chapter. The wait filters, refines, strengthens, and prepares you for what's coming. And here's the final hook. God does his best work in seasons that feel slow. He builds foundations, aligns purpose, deepens faith, and sets the stage for breakthrough. What looks like a standstill is often the most active season spiritually. God works while you wait. And what he is preparing will be worth every moment you trusted him. Strength isn't proven when everything is calm. Strength is revealed when the storm hits and you're still standing. Sometimes you look at your life and wonder how you made it through the nights you cried, the days you felt empty, the moments you were overwhelmed, and the seasons you didn't think you'd survive. But here you are, still breathing, still fighting, still pressing forward. That alone is evidence that you are stronger than the storm you're facing. Not because the storm wasn't real, not because the pain wasn't heavy, but because God placed a resilience inside you that the enemy couldn't break. Here's a hook. The storm didn't expose your weakness. It exposed your strength. When the winds blew, you didn't collapse. When the waves rose, you didn't drown. When the pressure intensified, you didn't quit. You may have bent, but you didn't break. You may have cried, but you kept going. You may have walked through darkness, but the darkness never stopped your steps. Every challenge you survived became proof of the power God planted within you. And here's another hook. What tried to break you is actually building you. Storms don't come to destroy strong people. They come to reveal them. Every battle you endure strengthens your spirit. Every setback you push through builds endurance. Every disappointment you overcome sharpens your character. You might not feel strong every day, but strength is not a feeling. It's a capacity, a spiritual muscle, a divine reinforcement that grows every time you refuse to give up. When life hits you hard, it's easy to think you're being defeated. But the truth is, storms test the foundation. They don't determine whether you succeed. They reveal how deeply anchored you are. And the fact that you're still here means your foundation is stronger than you realize. You've endured heartbreak that should have shattered you. You've survived losses that should have crushed you. You've walked through seasons where you didn't see a way, yet God made one anyway. Strength is not loud. Strength is not always confident. Strength is often quiet, steady, and persistent. Another hook, the storm didn't come to show you what you can't handle. It came to show you what you can handle. Sometimes God allows battles not to weaken you, but to elevate you. He uses storms to grow wisdom, deepen faith, and prepare you for blessings that require maturity. The storm you're facing is not a sign of defeat. It's a sign of development. It's shaping you into someone who can handle more, carry more, lead more, and rise higher. You've already survived things people don't even know about. You've dealt with silent battles, private tears, hidden fears, and unspoken pain. yet none of it stopped your purpose. You think you're barely holding on, but in reality, you are showing supernatural endurance. The storm hasn't taken you out because you weren't built to fall apart. You were built to rise. You were built to endure. You were built to overcome. Strength doesn't show up when life is easy. Strength shows up when you feel overwhelmed, but walk forward anyway. Another hook. Well, it looks like pressure is actually producing something in you. Pressure produces power. Pressure produces growth. Pressure produces clarity. Pressure produces a version of you that is wiser, stronger, and more grounded than before. Diamonds are formed under pressure. So are champions. So are overcomers. So are warriors. And that's what you are. Someone forged through fire, strengthened through storms, and shaped through seasons of difficulty. The enemy expected the storm to silence you, but it awakened you. He thought the struggle would break your spirit, but built your spirit. He thought the pain would make you quit, but it made you stronger. And that strength is not temporary, it's permanent. It's spiritual, it's God-given. Here's the final hook. The storm didn't defeat you because God put something inside you the storm couldn't reach. A divine strength, a supernatural endurance, a resilience that rises every time life knocks you down. That's why you're still here. That's why the storm didn't win. And that's why you're stronger than anything you're facing right now. There comes a point in life where you have to ask yourself, why am I carrying what God never asked me to carry? We hold on to worries that drain us, battles that exhaust us, and fears that were never meant to sit on our shoulders. But the truth is simple. What you release to God, He restores with power. There is a supernatural exchange that happens the moment you let go. God cannot fill hands that are clenched. He cannot pour into a heart that is overflowing with stress. He cannot guide a life that is gripping its own plans too tightly. But when you release what weighs you down, heaven releases what lifts you up. Here's the hook. Surrender is not weakness. Surrender is the doorway to strength. When you lay your burdens before God, you're not giving up, you're giving Him room to work. As long as you try to manage everything yourself, you limit the outcome to your own strength. But the moment you release it, you invite His strength into the situation. You shift from human effort to divine intervention. You move from carrying the weight to watching God move the weight. And that shift changes everything. Sometimes God is simply waiting for you to stop fighting battles that were never yours. You weren't created to carry every pressure, solve every problem, control every outcome, or fix every person. Some battles require spiritual surrender, not emotional struggle. The moment you hand it over, God begins to rearrange, restore, rebuild, and revive what you thought was too far gone. And here's another hook. What you place in God's hands multiplies. What you keep in your own hands drains you. Think about it. When you cling to fear, fear grows. When you cling to doubt, doubt spreads. When you cling to stress, stress tightens its grip. But when you release those things to God, He replaces them with strength, clarity, and peace. God never takes something from you without giving you something greater in return. Greater peace, greater wisdom, greater direction, greater power. Releasing your worries doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours. It means you trust that God has a better plan, a better viewpoint, and a better strategy than anything you could ever build alone. It means you understand that holding on is hurting you, but letting go is healing you. And healing begins the moment surrender begins. Another hook. Letting go is not losing, it's positioning yourself for restoration. Every time you release fear, God restores confidence. Every time you release anxiety, God restores peace. Every time you release bitterness, God restores joy. Every time you release control, God restores direction. Every time you release the past, God restores your future. Restoration doesn't happen while your hands are full. Restoration begins when your hands are open. God can't pour fresh blessings into a life crowded with old pain, old habits, and old battles. Sometimes the very thing blocking your breakthrough is the thing you refuse to release. And here comes the strongest hook. God cannot elevate you while you're holding on to what's weighing you down. Your next season requires freedom. Freedom from the bitterness that drains you. Freedom from the burdens that break you. Freedom from the memories that hold you hostage. Freedom from the lies that tell you you're stuck. When you release the heaviness, God breathes strength into the empty spaces. He fills you with a supernatural peace that doesn't make sense, a confidence that rises above fear, and a clarity that cuts through confusion. Releasing is not a one-time act. It's a lifestyle. Every morning you wake up, you choose to hand God the things that limit your joy and steal your peace. You choose to trust him with what you don't understand. You choose to lay down your battles so he can fight them his way. You choose to believe that surrender is the starting point of breakthrough. And as you release, God restores, not partially, not halfway, not minimally, but fully, deeply, powerfully. Because when you give him what you cannot carry, he gives you what you cannot earn. When you release the weight, he releases the power. When you let go, he steps in. And when he steps in, everything starts to change. Your steps are not random, accidental, or unnoticed. Your steps are divinely ordered today. Even when you feel like you're walking through uncertainty, every move is being guided by a God who sees the entire path from beginning to end. Nothing in your journey is wasted. Nothing in your day is overlooked. Nothing you face is a surprise to heaven. God has already gone ahead of you, preparing conversations, aligning opportunities, and moving obstacles out of your way before you ever even take a step. Here's the hook. You don't have to know the whole plan when you know the one who plans your steps. Too often we stress ourselves out trying to figure out everything at once, what to choose, where to go, how things will work out. But divine guidance is not about knowing the entire route. It's about trusting the one who holds the route. When God orders your steps, even the detours lead to destiny. Even the delays lead to development. Even the challenges lead to something greater. Your life is not wandering. It is being woven. There are moments when you don't understand why God led you somewhere uncomfortable. But every uncomfortable step carries purpose. Sometimes God guides you into a place that stretches you so it can strengthen you. Sometimes he guides you into a place that looks unfamiliar so he can introduce you to something new. Sometimes he lets you walk through what seems like a setback so he can reveal what was hidden. Divine guidance doesn't always feel smooth, but it is always strategic. Another hook. When God orders your steps, even your missteps fall under his mercy. What you thought was a wrong turn still teaches you something valuable. What you thought was wasted time becomes wisdom. What you thought was a failure becomes fuel. God knows how to bring purpose out of every step you take, even the ones you wouldn't choose again. Nothing you've walked through is outside his ability to redirect, reshape, or redeem. Every day, God places spiritual markers along your path. People you meet, moments that shift your thinking, opportunities that appear at just the right time, and even closed doors that protect you from harm. You may call it coincidence, but heaven calls it direction. You may see it as random, but God sees it as alignment. Every conversation, every connection, every closed door, every open door, it's all being used to steer you toward the life he designed. Here's another hook. Divine order doesn't mean every step will be easy, but every step will be intentional. Some steps require courage. Some steps require patience. Some steps require faith when the path ahead isn't clear. Some steps require letting go of what's behind you so you can move into what's ahead. But each one is part of a bigger journey that God is orchestrating with precision. The path may curve, but it never collapses. The direction may shift, but it never leads to a dead end. When God orders your steps, you always end up exactly where you're meant to be. Sometimes not by your timing, but always by His. There are days when you may feel lost, but feeling lost doesn't mean you are lost. You are guided even in the dark. God leads you through seasons where you can't see the next step, so learn to trust the one who lights the path. Guidance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's a nudge. Sometimes it's a sense of peace about something you can't explain. Sometimes it's a lack of peace that keeps you from entering the wrong situation. God speaks through silence, through stillness, through instincts, through disruptions, through delays, and through divine timing. Another hook, divine guidance often shows up disguised as what you didn't want, but ends up becoming exactly what you needed. A closed door that protects you from heartbreak, a delay that saves you from disaster, a disappointment that redirects you to something better, an interruption that puts you in the right place at the right time, a no that prepares you for a far greater yes. When God orders your steps, nothing is wasted. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is without purpose. You're not walking alone. You're not walking blindly. You're walking under divine direction. One step at a time, one moment at a time, one miracle at a time. Breakthrough doesn't begin with circumstances. It begins with a decision. It begins the moment you choose to believe that what God has promised is bigger than what you can see. Too often people wait for evidence, for results, for proof that change is coming. But faith doesn't wait for the visible. It acts on the invisible. Your breakthrough starts the moment you decide that failure will not define you, setbacks will not stop you, and obstacles will not dictate your destiny. Here's the hook. Believing before seeing is where true power begins. Faith is the engine that drives the impossible into the possible. When you decide to believe, doors that seem permanently closed begin to creak open. Walls that looked immovable begin to shake. Problems that seemed overwhelming start to dissolve. The moment you choose belief, God mobilizes forces behind the scenes, forces you cannot see, forces you cannot understand, forces that are already paving the way for your victory. Your decision to believe is a signal to heaven that you are ready for what's coming. And here's another hook. Faith is not about luck, timing, or coincidence. It's about alignment with God's purpose. When you believe, you align yourself with His plan. When you trust, you step into His timing. When you refuse to doubt, you release divine favor. Breakthrough doesn't happen because the storm disappears. It happens because God empowers you to rise above it. Belief doesn't make life easy, but it makes life unstoppable. The breakthrough that changes your story often requires faith to move you before the breakthrough arrives. Every challenge you face, every delay you experience, every obstacle in your path is not a signal that God has forgotten you. It's a setup for something greater. Here's a hook. The longer the struggle, the louder the glory when breakthrough comes. Your breakthrough is not just a change in circumstance. It's a revelation of God's power in your life. It's a demonstration that what seemed impossible was always possible through Him. It's a living testimony to those who doubted, watched, or tried to stop you. Faith is also the magnet that attracts opportunity. The moment you believe, your mindset, your actions, and your words begin to align with God's plan. You start making choices that favor your destiny. You start seeing possibilities that were invisible before. You start walking with a confidence that the enemy cannot shake because he knows that your breakthrough is already on its way. Another hook, believing first triggers action that the world cannot manufacture and the enemy cannot interrupt. Breakthrough often requires persistence in faith when everything seems still. Waiting is part of the process, but waiting with belief transforms waiting from frustration into preparation. Every prayer, every effort, every sacrifice becomes part of the momentum that leads to your victory. Your decision to believe gives power to prayers that might have seemed unanswered, multiplies efforts that seemed wasted, and strengthens resolve that might have weakened. The breakthrough begins internally first, through mindset, faith, and surrender, then manifests externally in ways that exceed expectation. Here's a powerful hook. Your breakthrough begins with what you decide, not with what you see. It begins when you choose to speak victory over defeat, when you choose hope over despair, when you choose persistence over surrender. The enemy may try to convince you that it's too late, that it's too hard, that it's impossible, but your choice to believe overrides every lie. The breakthrough has already been decreed. The breakthrough has already been prepared. The breakthrough has already been staged in heaven. Belief moves mountains. Belief opens doors. Belief creates opportunities. Belief shifts circumstances. And the most beautiful part is that belief is a decision, not a condition. You don't wait until you feel strong. You choose to believe now. You don't wait until the path is clear. You decide to trust now. You don't wait until the outcome is visible. You take the step of faith now. Breakthrough begins the moment you decide it will. And your decision triggers a series of events that heaven has already set into motion.